I've been out looking at jewelweed today. Jewelweed's also called touch-me-nots or wild touch-me-nots. Has a beautiful orange bloom, and the throat of it has little red dots on it. It's really beautiful. But jewelweed also, in some plants of the jewelweed, has yellow, just solid yellow blooms. They're really beautiful too. None of that grows near my house. I have seen it growing in Junaluska area of Cherokee County. This orange variety is what grows near in my mountain holler. It grows up alongside my driveway. Jewelweed likes damp, moist places, so the ditch that runs along my driveway is the perfect place for it to grow. And it's really prolific. It self-sows. It's a self-seeder. And the touch-me-not part is how it seeds itself. So the little seed pods get fatter and fatter and fatter until they'll finally burst. But if you touch them, it'll help them along that process. And it's really neat to do with kids. When I was little or younger and I was babysitting a lot of kids, I would always in the summer take them to find wild touch-me-nots or jewelweed so that it would entertain them for a long time, just letting them find those little fat pods to touch and watch the seeds burst. You know, they would just love it. And I'm sure someone probably taught me that as a child too, but I don't really remember who it is. Jewelweed is used medicinally for itchy stuff, like think poison oak, poison ivy, shoemake or sumac, poison sumac, but we call it shoemake here in Appalachia. Just bug bites, any kind of itchy skin ailment is what jewelweed is good for. People, it's a natural cortisone is why, and inside these little nodes, I don't know if you can see right there, you can see it's almost translucent, and that's because they're filled with juice, like a juicy part. So you break it open and mush it around, and that's what you can put on your poison oak or on your bug bite or whatever, and it will help. Some people do that and they freeze it. They put it in, they gather the juice and they freeze it in ice cubes, and that way they've kind of always got some on hand. I've never really heard of anybody making tinctures or salves or anything like that with it. And as far as drying it, it's such a moist plant that it'd be really, really hard to dry without letting it mold. I've also heard that jewelweed can be used as a preventative for poison oak or poison ivy. It often grows in the same general area, and people say that they break it open if they have to enter a place where there's some poison oak, and they rub it all over them before they actually come in contact with the poison oak. Now, I don't know if that really works, and I'm not sure that I would try it. It's funny, I've never had poison oak but one time in my life, and I don't ever want it again. But when Granny was pregnant with me, she had poison oak really bad, and Granny's the kind of person that literally she can be outside on the right day and the wind blows and somehow she gets poison oak. She's just very sensitive to it. But I never got it, and Pap always said when we were growing up, and the boys, Paul and Steve, would get it, that I didn't get it because I'd developed some kind of immunity because of Granny being pregnant with me when she had it. You know, I don't know if that's what it was or not, but I didn't ever get it. Until it was probably about 10 years ago, I was working for a lady up in Shooting Creek, and I was working in her yard, helping her landscape, and it was in the spring of the year. And her garden had really got overgrown, and I was trying to clean it out for her. So I was pulling weeds, and I just have arms full of it, you know, and taking it to a pile where she was going to burn it later. And I guess I inadvertently pulled up poison oak. Well, after I left that job, I had to go to another job to clean someone's house, so I didn't take a bath until, you know, it was later that night, and I guess that's why I got it. But I started itching, you know, fairly soon, like the next day. It was just on my forearms, on the inside of my arms where I'd carried the stuff. And I scratched it for a day or two and worried about it, and finally I come and showed Pap, and I said, "Do you think this is poison oak?" And he said, I don't know. It looks like poison oak, but Tipper, you've never had poison oak. I was like, I know. I can't figure it out. Well, I went back home and suffered another day or two with it. I tried all kinds of stuff. I put oatmeal on it, and of course I put calamine lotion and all that kind of stuff. I did not try jewelweed. That was before I knew about the medicinal properties of jewelweed. But finally, my brother Steve, who suffers with poison oak a whole lot, he heard about it, so he come to see me. He took one look and was like, "Yep, that's poison oak." He knew without a doubt because he'd had so much experience with it. But and I ended up going to the doctor then. I couldn't, one evening I was like, "I can't bear this anymore, Matt, I gotta go." So I went to the urgent care, and the doctor that seen me there, he said, "Honey, I'll tell you something, you waited about a week too late to come. You should have come a week earlier. You know, there's no reason for you to suffer like this." And he gave me a shot and I think some some pain medicine even. It was so bad. By then my arms were practically almost bleeding from all the different home remedies I'd tried. But anyway, that's the only time I've ever had poison oak, and I don't ever want to have it again. So I hope that my immunity was just tested by that early spring gathering of all the poison oak. Probably the sap was up in it or whatever when it was at its strongest. Another story about poison oak happened when me and Paul was little. Back in those days, we had gravity water, Granny and Pap did. So gravity water means that it come from a pipe way up the creek. There was a spring, and that's where we got our water, but Pap piped it to us in black water pipe. Well, in most places he buried it, but there's some places that there was just no burying it for that length of, you know, it's way up there. And so what would happen in the wintertime is if it was a really hard winter, the water would freeze. We'd always leave it running at night when we went to bed. Pap would leave it running in the sink, or maybe in the kitchen, or maybe in the bathroom, or maybe both. And a lot of times that would prevent it from freezing. But this was a winter that it just was a bitter cold winter, and it just seemed like the water stayed froze more than it did, no matter what we did. Well, the way Pap would thaw it is that he would build fires along the way of where it was out of the ground and thaw up the pipe. And it was joined in places, so then he could undo the pipe when it thawed and blow out the ice. Me and Paul loved that, because when the ice come out of the pipe, it was, you know, little round pieces. It was like popsicles. Of course, it didn't have no flavor, but we liked to go along so that we could play with that ice that come out of the pipes. Well, when Pap would build those fires, I reckon somehow we inadvertently put poison oak in it, and me and Paul was playing. Thankfully, they say it's really, really dangerous if you breathe in poison oak, but thankfully that didn't happen to any of us. But Paul ended up with poison oak, even though it was the dead of winter. So Pap would tell this story about how that he finally took Paul, it was pretty bad, took him to one of the local doctors, and Pap said, "I know that it's poison oak," and explained how Paul had got it. And the doctor said, "No, you can't get poison oak in the winter, that's not poison oak." And when the doctor left, the nurse looked at Pap and said, "She's crazy as you know what, that's poison oak if I ever seen it." But the doctor wouldn't say that it was, so Paul didn't get any medicine. Anyway, at that time, Pap's mother was in the hospital in Copper Hill, and Pap took Paul along with him to go see his mother, and a doctor there diagnosed Paul with poison oak, and he finally got the medicine. So that's just a funny story. But jewelweed is a natural medicinal remedy for poison oak. I hope you enjoyed this short talk about jewelweed. I hope you'll share this video with your friends and neighbors, but mostly I just hope you'll drop back by often as I celebrate Appalachia.